Coming up on 2.5 Geeks, boy, do we have a whole lot to talk about, including the AMD FirePro taking on NVIDIA's Quadro. I'm rhyming, and I'm not even trying. Then we're going to talk about power supplies. Is that even right? Operating systems attack, and a whole lot more.
The bar has been set wicked fast. It rocked in the benchmarks.
We're going to up the ante a little bit.
Processing power. I kind of understand this. Welcome back to 2.5 Geeks. I'm Ayaz Akhtar alongside Dave Altavilla and Marco Chiappetta. Instead of asking them how they're doing, I'm going to ask me how I'm doing. Hey, Ayaz, how you doing? I'm doing pretty well. How about you? Pretty good. Good. I'm glad. Hey, Dave, how are you?
I'm pretty good. Listening to you amuse yourself, so, getting better by the moment, I guess.
That's good. How about Marco? Marco Chiappetta, also on the line. We have a caller. His name is Marco. How's it going?
I'm doing pretty good. I feel like between the Mars Curiosity coverage and the Olympics and having two babies, I haven't slept much in the last couple of weeks, but I cannot complain.
And by two babies, Marco is talking about his two pet panthers.
Yes.
We don't know why he has panthers in Connecticut, but he does. It's just he has
Bubbles and Chi-Chi.
Chi-Chi's pretty cool. Let's go and talk about some hardware because why the heck not? The show title seems to suggest that. We're not here to talk about panthers, maybe mountain lions, but that's later. What we're going to talk about now is apparently one of the most disappointing pieces of hardware I haven't read a review like this on Hot Hardware yet, but the AMD FirePro W8000 and W9000. These, I believe, are workstation class graphics cards, which means they cost a crap ton of money. And, as far as I know, they kind of suck. Dave, can you explain?
Well, I don't know if I'd go as far as saying they suck. I think that's a little bit strong. We wouldn't use that vernacular around these parts anyways. But I would say that we were left a little flat. And perhaps more correct would be to say that they're not quite ready for prime time, at least from our initial testing that we've seen thus far. But what we had today, what AMD came forth to the market with today, was a release of their next generation FirePro W9000 and W8000 series of Pro professional graphics cards. And based on their new graphics core next architecture, which is what all of the most recent round of Radeon 7900 series graphics cards is based on. Their recent Radeon architecture, again, that graphics core next. So it marks a whole new architecture, a much more robust architecture from a hardware standpoint, but something is holding back the performance of these cards because it didn't prove out, the additional resources we had in hardware didn't prove out in the test results. We were kind of a little flummoxed by that, I guess you would say.
Now, its main competitor is from NVIDIA, the Quadro, and I believe NVIDIA just unveiled a workstation class, Maximus 2.0. Apparently, it's Kepler-based, supposed to be amazing. FirePro against the Quadro, how'd it go?
Well, let's talk a little bit about architecture first and discuss some of the differences between, the current gen that was just released by AMD and their previous generation product. And by the way, the NVIDIA announcement was a paper launch, sort of a PR press release in alignment with SIGGRAPH, and certainly probably to steal some thunder from their friends at AMD. But we don't have hardware for that product just yet. So more to come on that. But versus the previous generation Quadro, we can speak to that in a little bit. But let's talk about the hardware level changes. So from the previous generation Cypress core, the new Tahiti core based FirePro product scales up in a number of areas. You've got additional compute units up from 20 to 32. You've got 2048 shader processors up from 1600 shader processors, 128 texture units, and this is in the top of the line, W9000 series, max versus 80 in the previous generation FirePro, and 32 ROPs, or ROPs as we call them, and ROP units in this architecture versus the previous gen, which is also 32, so no change there. We also saw some boost in clock speed, so now we've got a 975 megahertz core clock versus 825 and 850 in the previous generation, and 1375 megahertz memory clock versus 1150 megahertz in the previous generation. So You've even got larger memory sizes available. 6 gig of GDDR5 now available in the high-end W9000 card. So beefed up in a lot of areas, except again for our ROPS figures. Again, 32 between the two architectures, but the performance didn't scale in accordance with the additional resources. We saw one test where it did. That was the Creo Parametric 2.0 test, where this is a sort of a wireframe and shader composite rendering program, a piece of software, and this is the spec benchmark suite, I should say, component of the benchmark suite that tests this app. And we did see some sizable gains for the new AMD product in the FirePro W9000 and actually the 9000 versus the Quadro and versus the 7900, their previous generation product, versus the Quadro 6000, actually beat it hand test. The problem is, in every other test, the new FirePros got handed it to them, I guess you would say, by the Quadro, and barely in some cases could keep pace with the previous generation hardware, only surpassing it mildly in a couple of spots. So a bit of a letdown there, and we're not quite sure why. It feels like immature drivers, to be honest.
It's not, you diffused that quite well. I did say it sucked, and you basically have broken it down to the very paternal. We're not upset with you, AMD. We're just very disappointed.
So yeah, I mean, honestly, disappointment is very much the word that would describe our results, with what we found in our results. Unfortunately, that's sort of the crux of what this product is all about. I mean, when you talk about the pro graphics market, the reason these cards are so expensive is because of the extensive verification and qualification process that each company has to go through to have their products, optimally tuned in each of these CAD and 3D rendering applications. Whether you talk about Maya, AutoCAD, 3D Studio Max, all of these, real heavy-duty, big iron rendering and 3D and CAD applications all take serious amount of verification and software. And so it was disappointing when, it seems like at least the, the software or the driver side of things was holding back the hardware, because that's kind of the whole crux of pro graphics and why pro graphics professionals and CAD designers go to that type of product. It may also be a result of graphics core next architecture for AMD being new to the market, and some of these applications need to be a little bit more hand tuned to take advantage of the hardware as well. But that's sort of a ISV relationships effort between AMD and the software developer as well, the independent software developer. So lots of subtle nuances there that could be contributing to the shortfall, but a shortfall it was, and what are you going to do? A little bit of a letdown.
On to one of the other unsung heroes in PCs. People are like, yeah, the graphics cards are really great, and we always talk about processors, and we always talk system on chips, all kinds of fun things like that. But nobody talks about power supplies, because they're a dime a dozen, right? They're all the same. I hear that's not true, Marco. I think you guys checked out the Corsair AX1200i digital ATX power supply, which I don't think I've ever heard before. Granted, I haven't built a system in a really long time. What exactly is going on here?
So first, kudos to Corsair for bringing a little excitement to the power supply market. The reason you haven't heard a digital ATX power supply before is because this is the first one. Corsair has actually blazed a trail in the power supply market, and how they did it was they took a server-grade 1200-watt power supply, and instead of using analog circuitry for regulation, there's a DSP, a digital signal processor, in this power supply that's used for real-time monitoring and performance tuning of the power supply. Now, by doing that, Corsair is also able to eliminate some components inside the unit, which increases efficiency. You have fewer components letting off heat, fewer components that could fail also. That's another side benefit. But all of this stuff culminates in a power supply that really stands apart from every other one on the market. This particular model we looked at, the AX1200i, is a 1200-watt unit, so extremely high-end, definitely for enthusiasts. But the kicker, even though it's high-end and, it's not for everybody, it's obviously not for everybody, It's so efficient, and one of the cool features is that the fan won't even spin up until it's under load by 30%, so about 360 watts. So if you did put this in an upper mid-range system, say an Ivy Bridge system that's never going to pull 1200 watts, it's basically silent until you're beaten on it. So that's a really cool feature. But there's a few other cool things that the DSP enables as well. So there's an accessory included with this power supply called the Corsair Link, and it's basically a USB interface. It plugs into a motherboard USB header, and then the other end of the cable plugs into a plug on the power supply, and it lets you install the Corsair Link dashboard software, so you can actually monitor the PSU in real time, and it also monitors hardware health of other components in the system, so you can see, just how much power is being pulled out of a certain PCI Express connector, how hot your CPU or GPU are running. Lots of really cool features here.
Any downsides to this? I mean, it's the first of its kind. It has a software front end, not exactly something you have very normally, at least as far as I know, with power supplies. Were there any downsides to this?
Not really. There's no technical downside that I could point to. If you want to nitpick, I'm sure some users aren't going to want to install any software for the power supply. And technically you don't. If you don't feel like tinkering and monitoring, you don't have to install the Corsair Link software. If you just want the benefits of a high-end digital power supply, you can do that. The other downside is it's expensive. It's a 350-watt power supply. So in the current market, it's one of the more expensive 1200-watt units. There's a PC Power and Cooling model that's a little bit more. There are a few less expensive Enermax and Thermaltake units out there. But there are more expensive, higher-end power supplies that aren't nearly as efficient. This is a 80-plus platinum certified PSU, so 90+% efficiency. I tested it at over 93% efficiency. So it's killer all around. There's nothing I could point. One more nitpick, because it's such a high-end PSU. If you wanted to do quad SLI or quad Crossfire with 4 graphics cards, it doesn't include enough PCI Express connectors. There's only 6 included in the box. But now you're really pushing the audience to an even smaller audience that would even consider that. So overall, killer effort by Corsair. I love the AX1200i. I'll really be excited when they bring these features down to a 750 or 850 watt unit that's less expensive.
On to the world of operating systems. Apple announced actually released Mountain Lion, not a Mountain Lion. The actual operating system's code name is Mountain Lion. That would be crazy. I know Bill Gates once released mosquitoes, but I don't think Apple's actually sent out lions yet. But anyway, I digress. I want to talk about an operating system here. It's been out, and you guys reviewed it extensively. Dave, what did you find out in the latest of the operating systems?
Yeah, Ray Wellington took a look at Mountain Lion for us, and it is the follow-on to Lion, which is a point release by Apple for their OS 10 series. And, as Snow Leopard was to Leopard prior to that. And so it's a $20 upgrade, or I should say update, to the operating system. And, there's a lot of additional functionality and features that were packaged into this release. So kudos to Apple for that. There's a lot of subtle changes that have sort of under the hood, point release kind of stuff that, you just sort of come to expect with point releases. Nothing too major. Things like autosave, which, by the way, is iCloud driven. The default autosave path is via iCloud or to iCloud. So I'm not sure if you like that, but Apple's sort of pulling you to the cloud. And other things like Facebook and Twitter and Flickr share capabilities now. Simple stuff like the Finder is improved with inline status updates as you transfer files. Progress bars, things like that. So it's subtle stuff that really some of this stuff is already built. If you compare and contrast to the Windows platform, already built in, but Apple's refining. In their platform, in their operating system. And there's some other bigger features, things like dictation and the new notification center that are actually some really nice updates and sort of help the OS meld, or I should say bring iOS-like features to the OS to meld the platforms together, to allow them to more naturally cooperate and interoperate, I should say.
Yeah, I've noticed the integration between the two, or they're kind of like converging to the point where it seems like Apple's basically saying, look, if you learned it on iOS, it'll still work the same way on OS X. But as far as I could tell, if you've used OS X in the past, you might be a little put off with all the changes because it's really, I want to say, sometimes dumbed down to the point where it's, mind-numbing.
Yeah. Dumbed down? What do you mean by that?
Well, like Launchpad. It's like, okay, where are all my applications? How can I get my applications otherwise? I can go to Finder and go to Applications. But now I have a gesture. I believe this came out in actually Lion to start with. But there's a lot of things that just don't seem like it's... It seems like it's getting more and more locked down. It seems like we're going to lose some features because it's becoming more and more like iOS. Then again, there's Microsoft with its already released, not because they wanted to, Windows 8, which is just floating around the web. With basically, it's a mobile interface that's just thrown on top of a desktop. I'm confused, Dave. Why are we merging all the OSs?
Well, I think it makes a lot of sense. I think you touched on something that Apple has to be very careful of. That they can, obviously step into very easily in their ways and alienate users. Let's talk about that, locking things down. Gatekeeper is new now to the OS X operating system, and Gatekeeper really smells and feels a lot like what the Windows platform does for non-WCL certified drivers. A warning screen comes up and says, this software you're trying to install, this driver you're trying to install, has not been approved and verified. However, Apple goes one step further and is now doing that for applications. So if it's not been Gatekeeper verified, you're going to get a notification about it. Now, it doesn't mean you can't install it. You can keep going and just click that thing off. But kind of Apple in your face saying, you didn't come to us with this. You sure you want to install it? They're going to claim, of course, we're trying to keep our operating system robust and, minimize the crashes and all that good stuff. But it feels like they're locking it down a little bit. And when you talk about Windows 8 coming to market and the Microsoft model, which is to not charge for point updates, Marco and I had a big debate about this. Apple's going to be really careful. They charge for these updates, and there's some really cool features that they've brought. Things like AirPlay, now available in OS X. Some real meaty stuff, not just point update under the hood stuff. But they charge $20 for it, whereas Microsoft gives it to you for free.
So, Marco, what was this debate? What was the other side? Should Apple not charge for these point updates? Should Microsoft start charging?
It actually started as like an editorial debate. In the process of proofing the article and editing it for publication, there was a statement in there about how it's sort of unheard of for someone to release a $20 operating system. And I disagreed with the statement. We ended up editing it. The reason I disagreed is this. Microsoft releases, say, XP or Windows 7, and you pay once to get it. And through the lifetime of the OS, you will get every service pack, any update Microsoft releases, any kind of security updates or feature updates or even app updates, like something like, say, Movie Maker or Media Player or Internet Explorer. You get all that stuff for free through the lifetime of the OS. Apple charges less initially, but every point release you're paying for it. So I know it's not exactly a clear argument here because there are new features coming in and out of OS X, and there's no real clear way to win this battle either way. I just sort of disagreed with that statement and said, hey, Microsoft gets no credit for updating for free for a decade, whereas people are excited that Apple charges for a point release. It was just a sort of an internal debate we had going on.
I think Microsoft doesn't get enough credit for supporting so many older versions and older pieces of hardware as time goes on, because I think one of the reasons why Apple charges is because if they were giving away the operating system for free and they were cutting off a bunch of people, because that feature, AirPlay, mirroring, fantastic feature, it only works on mid-2011 devices and higher, as far as I know. It doesn't work on any Mac Pro. So it basically, Apple said, you know what, we're going to charge you $20, so that's fine, because if you got it for free, you'd complain that you didn't get all the features, potentially. But, I mean, Microsoft, you get a ton of credit for basically saying, we're going to support 20 years worth of stuff, because that's what it seems like they're doing.
And that's absolutely right. I mean, and Marco and I actually, we went around the horn with this thing, and we both started to get our hands around it. and I totally see his point. You know, there's another feature that's added to OS 10.8 Mountain Lion, and it's called Power Nap. Well, guess what? Power Nap is out on the Windows platform. It's actually Intel technology driven that allows the processor to wake up the NIC, to go out, pulse the network, and update your Twitter feed, update your Facebook, update, you know, whatever, maybe pull in an email. And so when you wake up from sleep, all of your connected applications have updated themselves. That's an Intel-enabled technology that Apple had to build software for and utilize, but Windows already does this. And, you know, Microsoft didn't charge for it. It's available now to Ultrabook platforms and new platforms based on the Intel technology, the Ivy Bridge, and networking technology that goes with it. So, yeah, it's an interesting sort of thing, and that's what I was kind of touching on was Microsoft has a real opportunity here, and Apple has to be very careful because there's a big disparity between the go-to-market strategies there, and they need to make sure Apple needs to make sure they're not alienating the user base and not charging too much. And Microsoft, you know, I mean, you can't give it away for free either, so I don't know. They got to make sure they make a buck too. It's an interesting sort of paradigm.
Well, I'm hoping that neither one. This is obviously not going to happen with Apple, but I hope Microsoft doesn't start alienating desktop users and tablet users like they did their mobile platform. That's a whole mess, and I'm going to sweep that under the rug. Unless
can I make one more quick point while
Absolutely.
we're talking about the OSs?
Go for it.
It's kind of funny. Apple and Microsoft, if you really think about it, they're headed in the exact same direction. They're sort of creating much more synergy between their mobile devices and their desktop OS. Apple's been taking an incremental approach, you know, the last few years between the iPhone, iPad, and OS X. Microsoft is just dropping an anvil in everybody's head in a few more months. That's exactly, you know, that's the perfect analogy. You're going to go from, you know, Windows 7, everything's sort of fragmented. You got to install apps, do this and that to get all your stuff to work together. Windows 8's going to drop. Windows Phone 8's going to drop. And it's like, Surface is going to drop and all the Windows 8 tablets. And it's like, bam, everything is the same right from the get-go. So it's like Microsoft saying, all right, we have to go to the place Apple is headed faster than Apple, and they are going to alienate people, but if the products are good, hopefully they can, you know, keep everybody and win people back. We'll see how it shakes out in the next few months.
That's going to be a rough transition. It's like, where's my desktop? It's one of the tiles. It's somewhere. Don't worry about it. It's there.
The flip side of that is they're also the company that's still, you know, almost to this day has been supporting, you know, Windows XP. I mean, right? So, you know, they're going to support their old stuff for a while too. So you're not going to have to, if you don't want to, you don't have to jump ship.
So jump ship, cross lines in the sand, draw lines in the sand. I have no idea what's going on. But let's just move back to all kinds of fun with HTPCs. I happen to be in the market for a new HTPC because, you know, a giant tower is good, you know, as long as it's hidden. But, you know, you want something small, you know, in your system. And you guys checked out the Asrock Evasion 3D. And Marco, you get to play with all the HTPCs, so I'm very jealous. How was this one?
You should be. This is a killer HTPC. So nice. I'm going to give it I'm going to ding myself, but give this thing praise in this sentence here. I've had this thing for a while, and it's been just completely seamless in my home theater. That's kind of like the best compliment you could give a home theater PC. I plugged it in, and once the software was set up to my liking, it just works, and it kind of does everything. And the reason this PC can do everything is because it's really powerful for a home theater PC. You don't need this much horsepower in a machine of this type. You know, it's got a mobile Core i5 2520M, 8 gigs of RAM, a NVIDIA GeForce GT 540M with a gig of its own frame buffer memory, and a 750 gig, 7200 RPM hard drive. So you're talking a fairly powerful little PC. It's all comprised of mobile components. So that's how Asrock was able to keep the device nice and small and nice and clean. I also happen to really like the looks of the case. It's nice and simple. It's exactly the kind of styling I like. But you're talking about a relatively powerful PC. Can install Windows, install Linux, install whatever OS you want. It's an x86 PC, so you can do whatever you want with it. And it's got the horsepower to do everything from Blu-ray, 3D Blu-ray playback to any of the home theater front ends you want to run. It's also got a ton of connectivity. You have Wi-Fi, you have wired Ethernet, you have USB 3, tons of USB 2 ports. It's got a card reader built in. It really has everything you could want in a home theater PC, and a nice high-end home theater PC at that.
Nice note there at the high end, because I was taking a look at the review, and I happened to notice a high-end price for this thing too. It's a tiny little PC. It's basically a laptop without a screen, and they're charging as if you have a screen. It's about, what, $900?
Yeah, but it is expensive in the home theater PC space. You could get some really nice Zotac lower-end devices for a couple of $100. But if you break down the price of the components, let's say you wanted to build yourself a home theater PC with this kind of horsepower. If you buy a Core i5 with a nice quiet cooler, 8 gigs of RAM, a big hard drive, a mini ITX motherboard, something, maybe a Wi-Fi card if you want Wi-Fi, a case, a power supply that's nice and quiet, a media center remote, a Blu-ray drive, a GPU capable of 3D, and you add it all up, you're in the $600-700 range. So Asrock is charging a slight premium, but you also won't be able to build something this small. So they kind of have the right to do that, in my opinion. The premium, whether you think it's too much or not, that's going to be personal opinion. I love this thing. It's a really cool home theater PC. It's quiet, super powerful, do whatever you want. If you can afford it and you can find them available, I say go for it, but you absolutely do not need this much horsepower in a home theater PC.
That is not something I ever want to hear. You always need that much horsepower, because in the long run, when you're trying to keep this thing around for, I don't know, year 3, and it's just like you're hoping it can survive, you're like, oh yes, they overdid everything that first year. Thank you so much. Because the lifespan, especially with video and playing back video, it's one of the most unforgiving things you can do on a PC, and that's why home theater PCs are one of my passions. Also, I do agree with you, Marco, that the form factor looks tiny, and to pack in even things like a card reader, these small things. I mean, you think it's, oh yeah, I'll never use that. Yeah, you're going to. You're going to take a card out of your DSLR or out of your point and shoot, and you're going to pop it right in, instead of trying to find a dongle or something stupid, because it's a really cool looking device, and maybe I can find some scratch and pick it up myself. Let's talk about contest plugs. We got lots of contests going on, at least you guys do. I don't have any contests going on here. Well, maybe, but you guys are giving away lots of stuff. What's going on, Dave?
Yeah, we've got the Hot Hardware and Corsair Back to School Gaming System giveaway. That is a mouthful, but Corsair was good enough to give us a bucket load of technology to work with. Marco is going to be building a system based on a Corsair Silver Graphite 600T gaming case. Gorgeous case, by the way. PSU is the HX850 Gold by Corsair, and a Corsair H80 cooler, 16 gig of DDR3 1600 Dominator Platinum Corsair memory. A Corsair Force GS 180 gig SSD, and an input technology. We've got the Vengeance M90 mouse, the Vengeance K90 keyboard, the Vengeance 2000 headset for the audio side of things, and the whole thing's going to be driven by an Intel Core i7 2600K processor on a Z77 Express motherboard with Radeon HD 6970 graphics. Killer gaming rig. Decked in Corsair skins, powered by Corsair power supplies and memory and storage, and we can't wait to give it away. Just do a little bit of Facebook fanning of us, if you will, fan us, yeah, and share the contest out, and then stay active and comment on the forums and on the site and the news. And make yourself known, and you could win it. It's a beautiful rig.
Yeah, and that contest particularly, it's actually for the considerate. I mean, the Corsair Vengeance I want to say it's 2000. It's a 7.1 wireless gaming headset. Okay, it's 7.1 audio, and you're not annoying anybody because you're
right in your head, man. Only in your head.
And that by itself is like $150 by itself. So it's freaking awesome. I'm very, very jealous that somebody gets to win the whole thing, including a 7.1 wireless gaming headset. I mean, that's better than my home system. I have a 5.1, so that's lame. Anyway, any other contests going on? I think there's one more that's still sticking around.
Yes, the Hot Hardware and NVIDIA End of Nations beta key giveaway. We still got a bunch of keys to give away. Marco, we started with 100 of these things. I don't know how many's left, but we've got a few kicking around, right?
Yeah, I think we're down to like the last 20 or so. So if you want to get in on it, the beta opens up this weekend. So if you want to get in on it, shoot me an email. There's a link to the email address in the contest post.
End of Nations, pretty cool title, MMO, real-time strategy game, and absolutely free and available to you as a Hot Hardware reader. Lucky you.
So contest details, everything we talked about is available at HotHardware.com. So just go around the page, start clicking on things. You'll find out all kinds of information. Usually you can find the contest stuff on the right rail. Just take a look. Usually they're most commented on because, well, people like stuff. They like free stuff. It just so happens that you guys give away really great stuff all the time. It's awesome.
Like to give back a little bit.
Yeah, you guys do a great job with that. And if you want to go around the web, you could always check out youtube.com/hothardwarevids, twitter.com/hothardware, or facebook.com/hothardware, or even Google+. If you love Google+, you can always do a search for Hot Hardware and find great content right on Google+. So it's not all in one location. It's everywhere. And I think as Dave puts it, it's like the plague, which I still think is a really negative way to put it, Dave.
The scourge, yes.
It's a scourge, that's right. The scourge upon the internet, it is Hot Hardware in a good way. In a really good way.
It's a good scourge, yeah. Good kind of scourge.
I think that does it for us, and we will see everybody soon. Thanks for stopping by.